Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Peter Robinson.
And I'm Christopher Buckley.
You just behave for a moment. Formerly chief speechwriter for then Vice President George H.W. Bush, Christopher Buckley is now editor-at-large of Forbes Life magazine. Mr. Buckley, this is the last time I'm calling you Mr., so enjoy it, is the author of 13 books, including the comic novels Little Green Men, Boomsday, and Thank You for Smoking. The man Tom Wolfe has called, quote, one of the funniest writers in the English language, close quote, has just published a new comic novel.
Could you hold that up a little more prominently? Hold it closer to the camera.
Tighten in on
Let's
this
come
one.
in tight on the book. Okay.
Supreme Courtship. Segment 1, How He Does It. From the dust jacket of Supreme Courtship, I quote, President of the United States Donald Vanderkamp is at war with Capitol Hill after his Supreme Court nominee is nixed for insufficiently appreciating To Kill a Mockingbird. The president chooses someone so beloved by voters that the Senate won't have the guts to reject her. Judge Pepper Cartwright, the star of the nation's most popular reality show, Courtroom 6, close quote. Christopher Buckley, how do you come up with this stuff?
How did Mozart come up with his symphonies? How did Bach come up with his partitas? How does one analyze genius? It's beyond me. If you stare at the monthly mortgage statement long enough, this is surely where inspiration comes from.
Now I have a couple of questions here, and I'm going to cling to the
these are substantive.
They are substantive.
Elevated,
yes, they are.
Because I
cling to them as to a lamppost in a gale. Do you start with character or plot? Now I'll just sit back and let you.
I start by asking my publisher for money, as much of it as I can get. I say, how much will you give me? And if you give me a lot of money, I shall give you a good book. But, sir, if you offer me very little money, I will give you not a very good book. I wanted to write a book about the Supreme Court. I've done a bunch of Washington institutions. I've written novels about the White House, the State Department, the CIA, FBI, NASA. I'm starting to run out of Washington institutions, and I thought the Supreme Court. Why not?
Do your ideas, sort of semi-serious question, do your ideas sort of stack up like planes on the runway? Michener wrote someplace, somewhere, that he had never failed midway through one project suddenly to have a clear idea about what the next project would be. Is that the way it works with you, or do you have blank spaces?
No, I find I'm not a very big thinker, intellect. I take them one at a time. James Michener, by the way, I once read. And I don't want to spend too much time on Michener because I think this show should be about me.
Of course, yeah.
But James Michener used to read as research for his books up to 600 books, and he took no notes. He had a photographic memory. Anyway, of course, for this book,
He produced prose so inspiring that Keith Manow once offered a reward to anyone who could persuade him to stop writing. Do you remember that famous review in National Review?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. But old Michener also gave us, as a last line to one of his novels, a line that President Ronald Reagan used to quote copiously. Can you tell me, for the extra point, you, sir, having been a Ronald Reagan speechwriter,
yes,
what that line was and what book it came from?
I have no idea. I don't even have to listen for the whole Jeopardy ditty. I have no idea.
Where do we get such men?
That's Michener?
The last line of The Bridges at Toko Reed, and a line favored by Ronald Reagan.
I am going to force you to answer.
But enough about Michener.
Yes, back to you. I'm going to force you to answer just one question about method. On the one hand, we have Agatha Christie and P.G. Wodehouse. Well, Agatha Christie's prose. We'll just say P.G. Wodehouse. This is to flatter you enormously, of course, but not unduly.
I'm frequently
P.G. Wodehouse, 400 pages of notes.
Agatha Christie. We had the same hair.
Plotting in detail before he started. On the other hand, we have your father, who always at least claimed that he simply sat down and started writing. No plotting at all.
I think I read that book of his. Is that the one about Elvis? I'm a plotter. I am a plotter. I like to, in my youth, which is long ago, although you knew me then, when I had the confidence of my inability, I would writing a novel, I would see a door marked, "Come on down here, this is very promising," I would, drive away. And then 75 pages, 100 pages later, see a sign that said, "Dead end." Fooled you. So throw out those 100 pages. Now I like to have more of a blueprint.
Segment 2.
It's a very technical process. Yes. This is very, very highly technical.
All right. Segment 2, Supreme Courtship. I take this to be largely a book about the media. That's sort of the next level down of it, right? Your characterization, belly laugh, Washington institutions.
Insert belly laugh
yes.
here.
So let me set this up by saying, when you and I worked in the Reagan White House, David Gergen, the director of communications.
Do you mean the man that Andrew Ferguson referred to as a goggle-eyed melonhead?
I mean that very man, actually. Yes, I do.
Not that I subscribe to that.
If you intend to force me to defend David Gergen, I refuse, sir. I will not rise to that one.
There are some things I shall not do, sir.
All right. But David Gergen had in his office a television set that had been made for Bob Haldeman. And it contained 3 screens, a big one and 2 little ones, so the director of communications could watch all 3 evening newscasts at the same time. Today, the world of Supreme Courtship, cable channels, talk radio, the internet, and a pervasive feeling of madness. You've got one of your lead characters, Senator Dexter Mitchell, wants to run for president, decides actually what he'll do is resign from the Senate and play the president on a television program.
It's called POTUS.
POTUS, yes.
POTUS. And we know what POTUS stands for. I've always thought POTUS, which is, of course, the acronym.
It's an ugly word. I've never liked it.
It's the acronym for President of the United States. And you and I know that on the schedules we'd get, you know, the internal schedule would say, POTUS 302 meets with Miss Congeniality in Rose Garden. And, I've always thought POTUS would be a good name for an erectile dysfunction drug. Don't you think? POTUS. It's ready when you are. But seriously, I came here because I was told this was
Stanford campus.
This was a
this is
serious
my job.
television. We're on the Stanford campus. I was expecting, frankly, something a little more intellectually
Has
oriented.
the rise of the new
I mean,
media-
I'll go wherever you want to go.
Has the rise of the new media been good or bad for the political life of this republic?
But wasn't it Tom Wolfe who came up with the term the billion-footed beast to describe the media? It may not have been Wolfe, but he's clever, so let's ascribe it to him. I think it's become a bit of a billion-footed beast. The new media, it's dizzying. I mean, I grew up in the age. I am not that I want to give away my age, and I don't think I think I've aged rather gracefully. All of this makeup that these gentlemen applied to me before the show has been very helpful. I grew up at a time where there were 3 channels. CBS, NBC, and then a newfangled channel came along called ABC.
I too can remember when ABC was new.
Do you remember? They
Yes,
said,
I
I
do.
give it 6 months. Like if it's a fad. We only need 2 networks. And then there was then Channel 13 or UHF.
The educational television.
And you had to attach a funny-looking antenna to the back of your TV that was round, and Mom would wiggle it, or Dad would wiggle it, while Mom said, "No, I still can't make anything out." So there were, it was a simpler age, and there was in the afternoons there was the thud of the newspaper on the porch, and that was the afternoon paper. Now we have what? Keith Olbermann. May I say something about Keith Olbermann?
Please.
Keith Olbermann puts me in mind of a doctor who has just told you that you have 6 months to live and then checks his watch and says, "I gotta go." I've always wanted to say that on TV, and now
you've done it.
Now I've
You've lived in Washington. You moved to Washington in '81 to go to work for George H.W. Bush?
I moved to Washington during the Coolidge administration.
Right, exactly.
That was longer, a little bit before your time.
So, all right, so you've
1981.
Do you have the
historical perspective?
Well,
yes.
no,
I have a number of things.
Are you one of these
including
people who says
historical
Washington is deranged? It's not like the good old days. This media churn, this constant media frenzy, it's a debased place by comparison with the Washington that I knew when Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill would sit down over a snort.
Well,
so is there
remember?
something to that? Is there not?
Yeah, no, there is. I mean, remember these? You and I worked in an administration, led by this genial Irishman named Dutch, And he and Tip O'Neill, who was Speaker of the House, would scream at each other all day and call each other frightful names, you know, heartless old swine who doesn't care about widows and orphans. And Reagan would return the favor by saying, you know, he was destroying the economy. And then they would, you know, they'd sit down and over bourbons and tell jokes. That doesn't happen anymore, and that's. I like gridlock in a nutty world. The thing I most fear about this coming election is that we're going to end up with 60 senators in one party. Right. There, I think things could go very badly. But no, it's. Let's face it. It's not a very congenial environment.
All right. Segment 3, speech. Let me read you a few passages.
You'll be quoting from some of my more famous speeches.
Exactly.
Read the "We have nothing to fear but fear itself."
Yes,
yeah.
right.
Love that. That was one of my favorites.
I'll read you a few passages. You, former speechwriter, you hired me. Okay. Speechwriters talking about speeches. Right. And to calibrate the grading system here, I'll give you what we'll both agree, I think, should be 10 out of 10. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in. Close
Lincoln's
quote.
Second inaugural, 141 words, second best speech ever given in America.
Second best. All right. Sucker that I am.
First best? 407 years ago.
Okay, right.
Fair enough.
Right. Okay. All right, so we'll take Abe as 10 out of 10.
Let's make Abe the platinum standard. Sure.
Barack Obama, and I'll just go through. Okay. And I've done I think a fair job here of taking a passage from each
this
candidate.
This is nonpartisan.
Yes,
We're
exactly. We're grading the rhetoric.
Rhetoric.
Right.
Okay.
I don't fit the typical pedigree, and I haven't spent my career in the halls of Washington, but I stand before you tonight, his acceptance speech, because all across America something is stirring. What the naysayers don't understand is that this election has never been about me. It's about you. Close quote.
I'm not going to give that very high marks. It's hard to imagine anyone quoting that 50 years from now. I would, on a scale of 1 to 10, 2.
2. Does it strike you as solipsistic that anybody who says it's not about me, it's about you, really means it's about me?
It's rhetorical pandering. I mean, this is about you. I mean, that's something you'd expect. That's something I would expect to hear on, you know, Oprah or Regis and what's her name, Repa.
Joseph Biden, quote, "Almost every night I take the train home to Wilmington.
I love this.
As I look out the window at the homes we pass, you can hear the train clickety-click, clickety-click. I can almost hear what they're talking about at the kitchen table. Should Mom move in with us now that Dad is gone? $50, $60, $70 to fill up the car? Winter's coming. How are we going to pay the heating bills? Another year and no raise? That's the America that George Bush has left us, and that's the future John McCain will give us." Close quote.
But that's not Joe Biden. That's Neil Kinnock, isn't it? I think that's pretty good. I think that's very folksy, goes right to non-ornamental.
It's visual. You can actually picture it.
I don't think there's an adjective in there, and I very much. Did he actually say the click-clack?
No. That was my addition.
That was
no,
you see?
right.
You see that? Do you see that was the touch?
That was
the touch of genius.
Right. But that's actually rhetorically that's okay.
I think that's pretty good.
It's a picture.
No, it's a word picture.
Okay. John McCain, quote, "We lost the trust of the American people when some Republicans gave in to the temptations of corruption. We lost their trust when rather than reform government, both parties made it bigger. We lost their trust when we valued our power over our principles. We're going to change that. The party of Lincoln, Roosevelt, and Reagan is going to get back to basics." Close quote.
I give it a 5. I give it a sort of a 4.8. It's, you know, striving for grandeur. There are one too many P words in there for this power and principle. It's like, you know, the title of any White House memoir. They're always, you know, it's proximity to power, or power, principle, and parking spaces. He gives, as you know, McCain's strength is not the teleprompted
Right.
speech. He's
Right.
he's better on his feet. But it's somewhere between that.
But
What
one
you
does know
just
where he
read me
stands, right?
is
Yeah.
somewhere between the Obama that you read me and
Okay.
the Biden.
All right. By the way, with you remind me with these P words, in all the lexicon of the English language, I only discovered one word that would cause Ronald Reagan to stumble.
Pneumonia.
Particularly. And come to think of it, it turns out to be pretty damn near unpronounceable by anyone, doesn't it? Particularly. All right, Sarah Palin. Quote.
Okay.
Quote. I guess a small town mayor is sort of like a community organizer, except that you have actual responsibilities. Laugh. Then she continues.
Good.
I might add that in small towns, we don't quite know what to make of a candidate who lavishes praise on working people when they are listening, and then talks about how bitterly they cling to their religion and guns when those people aren't listening. We tend to prefer candidates who don't talk about us one way in Scranton and another way in San Francisco.
Notice
Close quote.
the S, of the Scranton versus San Francisco, which harks back, in a way, I think, to the, do you remember Jeane Kirkpatrick's rather nice formulation after the 1984 Democratic Convention, at which Jesse Jackson and Mario Cuomo gave the really stirring speeches, and she began referring to the San Francisco Democrats.
Yes.
San
Yes.
Francisco being a flashcard for,
Right.
arugula-eating, latte-drinking, Volvo driving sexual deviants.
Right.
That's pretty good, I think. I think that's pretty good what she read. I'd give that a 7, a solid 7.
Okay. By the way,
It's clever. I think it's clever.
It's clever and effective,
and it's specific.
right.
It was a
right.
knock on Obama's line about how people
in small
people
towns,
in small towns
right,
cling
to their religion
God,
and their guns.
God and guns.
From Supreme Courtship, I'm quoting a little passage. Well, the Chief Justice said, industry is the enemy of melancholy. Rochefoucauld, Pepper asked. No, the Chief Justice replied, William F. Buckley, Jr. What was the principal delight in growing up as the son of William F. Buckley, Jr.?
I would say the Friday night sailing trips. He had a sailboat, and he loved to go sailing of a Friday night. And when I was young, he made it great fun. He would bury treasure and produce a map that looked as though it had been drawn by Captain Kidd, and we would go and find the treasure. And later years, he became absolutely adamant about his Friday night sails. And in October 1997, he had arranged a Friday night sail. And I took the train up from Washington, the clickety-clack of the reels, as Biden would say. And I began sort of looking out the window and seeing, trees being uprooted by a wind and houses flying at cows. It was like the scene in The
Wizard of Oz, right?
Yeah, yeah. So the train pulled into the Stanford station, and my father I looked out, saw him on the platform. He was holding on to a signpost, sort of almost horizontally. The doors of the train opened. I was blown back into the train, sort of crawled out on practically on all fours. There was a northeast gale in progress, and I sort of looked up, and he said, "Well, we should have a brisk sail." I said, "We're going out in this?" And indeed, we went out in it. Yeah, 55 miles an hour. It was Laurie Chickering.
Yes.
No stranger, who I bet has sat at this table and said intellectual things, because that is his way. Laurie Chickering was along. There were 4 of us, and Laurie had never been on a sailboat
You are, oh
in
my goodness.
his life, and he looked up at me. It was, the wind was whistling, and he said, "Do you think I should take a seasick pill?" I said, "Laurie, you're going to be too scared to throw up." And that was quite a memorable night. That was my old man. Great men, I've always said about him, I think at his memorial service, great men always have too much canvas up. They defy the odds. They're great risk takers.
From the eulogy you delivered for your father at St. Patrick's, quote, I'm quoting you, I went up to Yale recently to inspect his archive of papers. 6,000 newspaper columns, countless articles, over 50 books. They total more than 550 linear feet. To put that in perspective, the spire of St. Patrick's rises 300 feet above us, close quote. Now, when your father was about the age you are now, I asked him a question, and I would like to put the same question to you. And the question, I don't know actually where I got I think we may have had a glass of wine before I asked this question, because...
You mean alcohol was involved?
Can you imagine such a thing? Also cigars, probably. But I said, you were born wealthy, and you became famous at a very young age. Why do you keep working so hard? And I say the same to you. You may not quite have a St. Patrick's spire to your name in a university library yet, but you have produced
my memorial service at St. Patrick's is going to draw to a full house.
Christopher, this is your 13th book. You publish. I can't go into a dentist or doctor's office anywhere without picking up a New Yorker or a New York Times and seeing something you've written.
Damned annoying, I know.
You work hard, always.
Well, but it gives me pleasure. I don't, I'm not, listen, I couldn't retire given, have you looked at your 401k since today? It gives me pleasure. I would be, I'd be lost without this. Some people, I don't know. I love doing it. It gives me pleasure writing. It's something I try to do every day.
Your father's answer was, I was raised this way. My father told me I had an obligation to my country. And that's what he said. And then you and I also know that he was also always fleeing from boredom. That's not the case with you, though, is it?
Well, I don't like to be bored, but
you don't fear it. He almost was.
He had he was the most impatient man I knew. I'm sure you went out to a restaurant in the course of your long acquaintance and friendship with him, and he was a great admirer of yours. He would order, the moment the main course arrived, he would order the dessert. He was really the most impatient man I knew. But that again was important. I've known a couple of great men, and they all share that characteristic. They have this sort of fear of the wasted time. Now it can get a little cuckoo for those around them, but that's who they are.
Final segment, our sharpest guide. Now, whereas your father was in the business of stating his political views, you are in the business of making Americans laugh. And what that means is that your views of politics glimmer occasionally from underneath. And if I may, I'd like to haul them up into plain view for once.
Oh dear.
Yes.
Oh dear, I was afraid this would happen. Can't we just stop here? Surely 4 segments were enough, and 5 segments.
In 2004, you've written that you voted for neither John Kerry nor George W. Bush, but that you wrote in George H.W. Bush. Why?
Because I love him, and by 2004, I was no longer able to vote for President Bush 43, nor did I incline to cast my vote for Senator Kerry, which left me with the quandary of who am I going to vote for. And the best man I knew for the job was the man you and I both worked for and love, George Herbert Walker Bush. So I did, and oddly he didn't win.
I quote you in the Washington Monthly, quote, "The Republican Party I grew up into, Dwight Eisenhower, William F. Buckley Jr., Barry Goldwater, Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, stood for certain things." And then you go on to make this quite arresting...
Watergate, breaking into psychiatrists' offices.
Well, you continue with this
price and wage and price control.
This very arresting formulation, despite its failures, that is the failures of the Republican Party, one had the sense that the party at least knew in its heart of hearts that these were failures, either of principle or execution, close quote. So you seem to be suggesting there that by 2004, 2005, there was some kind of combination of cluelessness and shamelessness in the current administration. What was it, the war? Did it really come down to the war for you, or was it...
Well, I think, let's face it, the war, and with all, with all due patriotic respect for the men and women who are fighting there and dying there, I have two godsons currently in that fight, so it's something I don't view at all glibly. But let's face it, this was a misbegotten enterprise. I'm not saying we should now just pull out and let it all collapse, but this was, the lack of weapons finding the weapons of mass destruction, I think, seriously undermined the people's confidence in the government. I mean, the President of the United States looked us straight in the eye and said, these are there, we've got to go get them. Partly the war, partly the fiscal incontinence. I don't think I think it's very difficult to be proud of what 8 years of republicanism have wrought. We have a $500 billion deficit. We have now a collapsing situation on Wall Street. My dad, since we've been talking about him, I'll quote him. A year before he died, he was asked what he thought of the state of conservatism, and he replied in a very WFB mode that he thought it had descended into sloth, as he pronounced it, and that it was in need of repristination. Lovely word. Right. And I think it's hard to disagree with that.
With single-digit weeks to go before Election Day, is John McCain the man to do the job of repristination?
I'm not sure he is, and I say that with heaviness and sadness in my heart because I've known him for a while and I admire him, but I don't think he's the guy to do this, and I don't think he's going to do it. I think what's happening right now on Wall Street is will elect Obama. 82%, something like, however they arrive at these precise formulations, if the American people think the country is headed in the wrong direction, I think it's a very hard sell to say that McCain is the one who's going to take us in that direction. That said, and now look, I like Barack Obama. I went out and bought his books. I'm one of the reasons he's worth $4 million, and I don't begrudge him a penny of that because that guy can write.
He can write.
He can write, and you and I value the able pen. I think he's going to get this, and
that will not break your heart.
No, it's not going to break my heart. But I wish him luck, and I hope that he will proceed in a non-ideological way. Look, he's a left-wing guy. I'm not. If he just goes down the left wing and raises taxes and increases tariffs and does all that, then we are in for a very, very rough time. I like to think that he is too bright to do that and is going to, as we say, govern from the center, but that he's going to govern creatively. But he has asked for it, and he may get it, and I say, good luck, and give me a call if I can help.
From the New York Times Review of Supreme Courtship, quote, Buckley remains our sharpest guide to the Capitol and a more serious one than we may suppose, close quote. When readers finish, final question, when readers finish Supreme Courtship, what do you wish them to conclude about American life?
That they are lucky to have a front row seat at this carnival. I don't think there's another one like it.
Christopher Buckley, man of letters, and after 13 books, you can't deny it.
You mean de lettres?
De lettres.
As we say.
Belles lettres.
Belles lettres.
Belletrist, Christopher Buckley.
Another word, belletrist.
Exactly.
Another WFB word.
Exactly. I've never heard anyone else use it. And author of Supreme Courtship, thank you. At the Hoover Institution, I'm Peter Robinson.
And I'm Christopher Buckley.
For Uncommon Knowledge, thank you for joining us.